If you've wondered what Romance languages are or what people mean when they refer to Romance languages like French, does it have anything to do with love or is it to do with Rome? This video is just an explanation, a not too long explanation on what they are, just for people who are wondering. So yeah, what are Romance languages? So Romance languages are literally languages descended from Vulgar Latin, and they're called that because Vulgar Latin was spoken Latin was spoken by the Roman Empire. So if you're wondering what the significance of that word romance means, it's to do with the word Rome. It comes from the Roman Empire because that was the empire that spoke Latin, and Romance languages are descended from Latin, so they have a lot in common with it. That is the simple explanation of what Romance languages are and why it's called that. But if you wanted to know a little bit more about them, this is what this video is basically going to be about, explaining how they've evolved over time and what the Romance languages are they easy, should you learn them, that kind of thing. And I'll probably try and make this like 5 minutes long or something, so if you wanted just an explanation on it, just to settle your thoughts, then yeah, this is what this video is going to be. So dozens of them are spoken today. I believe roughly about 30 to exist. There's disputes over what's considered just a dialect or what's considered its own language and that kind of thing. But yeah, roughly 32 exist today. Don't fight me on the number because I'll win. But yeah, dozens of languages are spoken with about, I think it's 900 million plus native speakers of Romance languages in the world. That might be maybe total speakers. I think I've written that wrong, sorry. There are a lot of people who speak them though. The 5 most common of which are Spanish, which has 475 million plus speakers, obviously. French, Portuguese, Italian, and Romanian. They're the 5 most common. Obviously, Romanian and to an extent Italian aren't spoken as much, but the other 3 are, and a lot of this is due to their colonies. So Spain, France, and Portugal are actually quite small countries. Kind of. France is a bit bigger. I think it's got 70 million people, but they're not too big. The reason they are spoken a lot is 1, because people want to learn those languages, and 2, because of colonies. So Spain has Mexico with 140 million people, Portugal has Brazil with 220 million people, something like that, more than 200 million, and what's the other one? France has tons of colonies throughout Africa, and the islands around Australia, a lot of them are French speaking. So yeah, these countries all have plenty of other countries that speak their language, and that kind of boosts the total population of speakers. Romanian, as far as I know, doesn't. It's only Romania, I think, that speaks it, and Italy. There are a few other tiny countries like Vatican, San Marino, and it's spoken in a few parts in like Austria and Switzerland. But yeah, overall, they aren't as spoken. But yeah, Romance languages are very much spoken. They're usually considered to be easy for English speakers, and this is because they feature easy vocabulary, so a high amount of similarity, familiar grammar rules, and limited challenges overall. We'll get into that in the further slide. But also, Romance languages use the Latin alphabet, the Latin alphabet is literally the letters English uses, so that makes it easier. You don't have to learn like a Japanese, like a completely different alphabet to learn French or something. You literally just use the same alphabet, just different pronunciation and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty easy. Just a fact as well, Romanian, even though they all use the Latin alphabet, that hasn't always been the case. Romanian used to use Cyrillic, which is the kind of alphabet Russian uses, so it does have some Cyrillic influence, and then a few other bits and bobs have used other alphabets. So apparently some Spanish dialects use the Arabic script, which I knew Spanish was slightly influenced by Arabic, but I didn't know that, so that was interesting. Yeah, this is just a quick map. I'm not going to spend too long here because you can pause the video if you want to have a look, but that's kind of where the languages are spoken. As far as the main ones go, French is obviously spoken in France and so on with all the other countries, but there's a few other minor languages that are spoken in interesting parts like Galician. Oh yeah, Galician is spoken in that kind of corner of the Spain-Portugal peninsula, which is it a peninsula? Yeah, it is, which is interesting. And yeah, there's a few others if you wanted to pause the video. Just as far as origin goes, I'll get through this really quickly. So Latin was originally spoken in 7th century BC in Latium. There is a lot of debate over the exact dates, but this is just a rough outline of it. Latium is a place near Rome in modern-day Italy, which is where Latin was originally spoken. It evolved from Proto-Italic, which is basically the language before Latin that it evolved into, and since then it was adopted by the Roman Republic, which became the Roman Empire, and it was spread throughout a large part of Europe and other places, and spoken very, very commonly in Europe. Latin evolved over time. There's different stages of Latin, like there's Old Latin, Classical Latin, Vulgar Latin. Again, the dates of those languages are argued over, but the main thing you need to know is Latin was spoken everywhere. It was spread everywhere in Europe, and it was very common, and it was spoken until it was spoken by the Roman Empire until 476 AD, obviously, because the Roman Empire fell, so it couldn't be spoken by a country that didn't exist anymore. And yeah, as far as Vulgar Latin goes, that is Latin spoken after 200 AD, which can be confusing because Vulgar Latin, that term Vulgar Latin, is used for a few different things, like not just the time period of Latin it was spoken, so that can be confusing. But when people say descended from Vulgar Latin, when they're talking about Romance languages, they basically mean the latest form of Latin as it was spoken. So you could just say descended from Latin as well, for simplicity. Someone's going to disagree with that in the comment section. It's a bit complicated, but essentially Romance languages are descended from Latin, which was spoken by the Roman Empire, hence the name Romance languages. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Latin was still spoken. Obviously, they didn't just forget the language as soon as the country fell. It was a commonly used language for basically thousands of years. It was used well into the 19th century AD, which is the 1800s, for communication, academics, just general use, and then it kind of fell out because it was replaced in a lot of its uses by Romance languages, spoken in respective periods of, in their respective regions of Europe. Sorry, I should say. So yeah, after that it wasn't really used, and now it's considered a dead language. I've already done a video on that. I might link it in the description. But what a dead language is basically a language is not learnt as a native language anymore. So people might still learn it as people do with Latin, but nobody teaches their kids that as their first language. So it's dead, even though it is still spoken. It can be confusing, but yeah. It has survived through its popular ancestors, though, so obviously, I haven't put an apostrophe on that. Sorry, that's terrible of me. It has survived through its ancestors, obviously, because there's massive amount of speakers, as we just talked about, of French, Italian, Spanish, all those kinds of things, Portuguese. So yeah, it definitely has descendants and is widely spoken, but yeah, Latin is well and truly dead. It is not spoken by any country today. So yeah, classification. I'm not going to go through all of these because it's just me reading stuff that's on the screen. But yeah, you can pause the video and have a look. That's kind of how Romance languages get further split up into different groups. You can kind of see what's similar to each other, what isn't, that kind of thing. There's still debate over what's put in each category because it's obviously a lot of opinion, and it's put together by researching old text and that kind of thing. But yeah, if you wanted to pause the video and have a look, you're welcome to. As far as difficulty and usefulness goes, Romance languages are not difficult to learn generally. There's a lot of varying. Obviously, a language like Spanish is much easier than Romanian because Romanian has a lot of Cyrillic influence, whereas Spanish is quite easy and has a high lexical similarity to English. Lexical similarity just means vocabulary. Kind of, not real. I shouldn't have said that. Lexical similarity is how similar the words are of the language. So if two languages have a lexical similarity of 1, they use identical words. If they have a lexical similarity of 0, they have nothing in common. So Romance languages have some of the highest lexical similarity in English, which obviously makes a language easier. Yeah, they have similar phonemes, which is just kind of like the sounds. So there's no weird, like in the Arabic alphabet, for example, there's a few weird sounds that are really hard to pronounce. Same with a lot of Asian, African, and Middle Eastern languages. There's none of that really, usually with Romance languages, so it's quite easy. The worst it gets generally is accents and stuff, and some diphthongs. Like in Romanian, there's some interesting diphthongs that can be, you wouldn't think you'd pronounce it that way because it's not written that way, but then again, English does that as well. So yeah, overall the pronunciation is not that difficult, especially if you pick an easier Romance language. The easier ones, in my opinion, are Spanish and Italian are quite easy. I believe Portuguese is as well, but I don't know a lot about that. Romanian is out of the main 5, Romanian is generally considered the hardest, with French is probably the second hardest, but there's a bit of a gap between them. Romanian uses some interesting things, so like they attach the article to the end of the word. If you don't know what that means, I'm not going to explain it, but yeah, there's a few difficult things. They also, as I said before, use the Latin script, which is easy to understand. The diacritics are easy enough to understand, you just have to learn them. Like, if you don't know what a cedilla or an acute accent or a grave accent or an umlaut, if they use that, I don't think Romance languages do. You can learn them quickly, it's easy enough. Romance languages are also very useful, so as I talked about, there's a lot of people who speak them. They're the most popular languages for learning generally. If you go onto anything like Duolingo, all the ones at the top are all like French, Spanish, Italian, those kinds of things. So yeah, learning them, there are a lot of other people to learn them as well. There's tons of resources. And learning one or more makes it easier to learn more Romance languages. The more you learn, the easier it gets. So I learnt Italian, and I was able to teach myself. I can read, I think, A1 and 2 level French text with not that much difficulty. Even though I don't get every word, I can just kind of understand what a lot of them are because of context and my knowledge of Italian, which uses a similar vocabulary. So yeah, and everyone is kind of impressed and respects it. Being able to speak French or whatever is cool. So yeah, it's a good place to start for beginners. Overall, Romance languages aren't that hard, and they are pretty useful. That's basically all there is to it. If after that you still don't know what a Romance language is, just to summarize, Romance languages are languages spoken today, like French, Italian, Spanish, that are descended from Latin, which is spoken by the Roman Empire, which is why they're called Romance languages. It's not to do with love per se, it's to do with Rome. That's where that word comes from. But a lot of them are they sound a bit lovey-dovey like French. So yeah, that's kind of bled into that as well, and a lot of people see Romance languages as kind of love languages, but they're from Rome. That's why they're called that. They're excellent for beginners, they're not too easy, and they're quite fun, and they're very rewarding. So yeah, I would recommend learning one if you haven't learned one before, or even if you have learned languages before, they're quite easy, so you can smash it out and add that to your list if that's how you are. I will put a link in the description to some resources for starting Romance languages, and I'll also link a website I used to read about them a bit. And yeah, that's basically all there is. If you wanted to check out my language learning website, Head of State Language Learning, I will have a link in the description for that as well. It's completely free and has resources for a lot of languages, although it isn't completely operational. But yeah, I'm also planning on doing a Q&A for the channel, so any questions you want to ask or videos you want to see, chuck them in the comment section. And yeah, like and subscribe, because it makes me feel better about all the time I invest for free. So yeah, thank you. We did go a little bit over 5 minutes. We went to 11 minutes, but yeah, we'll stop it before 11 and a half minutes, hopefully. So yeah, enjoy.